Leonidas was not a noble martyr frozen in legend. He was forged by hunger, fear, and obedience, then unleashed as king. This is the story before the pass, before the myth, where mercy died long before Thermopylae. Leonidas is not born screaming, he is born silent. That silence matters. In Sparta, silence is survival. Crying is weakness. Weakness is death. The elders watch infants the way executioners watch prisoners, already deciding whether the body before them deserves a future. Leonidas is inspected, turned, judged. He lives, not because he is loved, because he is acceptable. From the first breath, his life belongs to the state. He is the second son. That matters too. The throne belongs to his half-brother, Cleomenes. Leonidas is spare flesh, a contingency, a body meant to be spent. No tutors, no soft hands. No future planned beyond obedience. At 7, they take him. No ceremony, no goodbye. His mother does not cry. If she did, it would shame him. The ago does not care who he is. It strips names first, then comfort, then fear, until only reflex remains. Hunger becomes constant, not an event, a condition. Boys steal to survive, and if caught, they are beaten, not for stealing, but for failing. Leonidas learns quickly. Pain is instruction, pain is correction, pain is love. In its Spartan form, they pit children against each other. Smaller boys fight bigger ones. Brothers fight brothers. Blood spills onto dirt that has seen it all before. Leonidas does not fight to win. He fights to endure. He learns where bones break. He learns how screams sound when they're real. He learns that mercy earns punishment. By 12, his back is scar tissue. By 15, his face no longer looks like a child's. By 20, he has stopped asking why. Sparta does not teach philosophy. It teaches inevitability. The elders watch him. They always do. Not because he is special, but because he is useful. He does not hesitate. He does not boast. He follows orders even when they make no sense, especially then. Leonidas learns the first great Spartan truth. Obedience is virtue. Questioning is treason. Cleomenes rules while Leonidas trains. Cleomenes is volatile, paranoid, erratic, a king shaped by power instead of pain. Where Leonidas is controlled, Cleomenes is chaos. The contrast will matter later. Leonidas becomes a soldier before he becomes a man. He is sent into the countryside alone, armed with little more than a knife. He learns to kill quietly. Helots, state-owned slaves, are hunted as training exercises. Their deaths are lessons, warnings, rituals of terror, meant to keep an entire population submissive. This is not war, this is policy. Leonidas kills his first man without ceremony. No rage, no hesitation. The body drops. The world does not end. That matters too. Something hardens inside him. Not cruelty, but acceptance. Killing is not an act. It is a function. Years pass in blood and repetition. Leonidas survives where others don't. Not because he is stronger, because he adapts, he listens, he obeys, he endures. Then Cleomenes begins to unravel. The king grows unstable. Accusations fly. Allies become enemies. Madness whispers through the palace halls. Eventually, Cleomenes is imprisoned, then dead, officially by suicide, though no one truly believes it. Suddenly, the spare is no longer spare. Leonidas is older now, hardened, scarred. He has never ruled, never wanted to. But Sparta does not ask what you want. It asks what you will do. The crown is placed on his head like a weapon being loaded. He marries Gorgo, not for love, but for stability. She is sharp, perceptive, dangerous in her own way. She understands Sparta because she believes in it. That frightens Leonidas more than any enemy. As king, Leonidas does not soften. He cannot. The system that made him would devour him if he tried. He enforces the laws with cold precision. The agoge continues. The killings continue. The fear continues. Sparta thrives on discipline and dies without it. Then word arrives from the east. A king of kings, an empire without end. Xerxes I demands submission. Earth and water, symbols of surrender. The council debates. The ephors hesitate. The omens are inconvenient. Religion becomes excuse. Leonidas listens, says nothing. Silence again. He knows this truth too. Sparta cannot survive defiance forever, but it cannot survive surrender at all. When he finally speaks, it is not poetry. It is policy. War is coming. And Leonidas does not march because he seeks glory. He marches because Sparta has trained him to do only one thing well: stand where he is told, until ordered otherwise, or until dead. The pass at Thermopylae is chosen not for heroism, but efficiency. Fewer men needed. Maximum delay, a calculation, not a legend. Later, men like Herodotus will write of honor and sacrifice. They will carve poetry from blood. They will turn Leonidas into something noble. But before the myth, before the speeches, Before the last stand, there was only a boy taught never to question, a man shaped into a tool, and a king who knew exactly how expendable he was. Leonidas does not march to die. He marches because Sparta taught him that his life was never his to keep. Leonidas does not change when he becomes king. That is the mistake outsiders make. In Sparta, power does not transform a man. It reveals what training already carved into him. Leonidas has been carved down to essentials: discipline, endurance, control. Everything else was beaten out long ago. He rules the way he was taught to live, without excess, without mercy, without explanation. There are no reforms, no relief, no kindness disguised as progress. The agoge continues exactly as it always has. Boys are still taken. Hunger is still instructional. Pain is still policy. Leonidas signs the orders with the same hand that once bled on training dirt. If anything, he tightens standards. The weak cost resources. The soft create instability. Sparta does not need compassion. It needs obedience. The helots feel it first. The annual declarations of war against the enslaved population are renewed, not because rebellion is imminent, but because terror must be maintained. Leonidas understands something deeply unsettling. Fear decays if left unused. It must be refreshed. Violence is not a reaction. It is maintenance. Night raids continue. Young Spartans slip into villages and return before dawn, with blood on their hands and silence in their mouths. Leonidas does not ask for reports. Numbers do not matter, only effect. This is how peace is kept. His wife, Gorgo, watches him closely. She is not frightened. She is impressed. She has known since childhood that Sparta survives only because men like Leonidas exist, men who do not hesitate when others debate, men who will break a generation to save a system. She advises him but never softens him. Her counsel is sharp, strategic, ruthless. Together they form a unit perfectly adapted to Spartan logic. Love is irrelevant. Respect is everything. Beyond Sparta, the Greek world fractures. City-states bicker. Alliances shift. Old grudges resurface. Athens grows louder, richer, more dangerous in its ideas. Democracy spreads like a disease, encouraging men to believe their opinions matter. Leonidas does not fear Athens' ships or walls. He fears their philosophy. A soldier who thinks is unpredictable. When messengers arrive from the east, the room grows colder. The Persian Empire does not negotiate as equals. It absorbs, it devours. Its armies are not counted in hundreds or thousands, but in abstractions, endless, grinding, impersonal. Entire cultures disappear into its administrative machinery. The demand is simple: submission, earth and water. The council argues. The Air Force hide behind religion. Omens are consulted. The gods are suddenly inconveniently vague. Delay becomes policy. Leonidas listens. He remembers being 7 years old, standing barefoot on frozen ground, learning that hesitation earns punishment. Sparta trained him to act, not wait, to endure consequences, not avoid them. When the Persian envoys speak, they do so with rehearsed arrogance. They list titles, victories, inevitability. Leonidas kills them, not in rage, not theatrically, efficiently. The message is unmistakable. Such war is now unavoidable. This is not defiance born of pride. It is consistency. Sparta cannot survive submission, not politically, not culturally, not psychologically. Once fear shifts from internal discipline to external masters, the system collapses. Leonidas understands the mathematics of empire. He also understands the mathematics of myth. He does not intend to defeat Persia. He intends to define the cost of conquering Sparta. Mobilization begins, but not fully. Religious festivals provide the perfect excuse. Only a small force is authorized. 300 Spartiates, elite, experienced, fathers of sons, men whose bloodlines are secure. This is not symbolism. It is efficiency. Sparta cannot afford to lose genetic capital. Leonidas chooses men who have already reproduced. He chooses men whose deaths will not end family lines. He chooses men who understand exactly what is being asked of them. No speeches are necessary. They march north toward Thermopylae, not as heroes, but as assets. The pass is narrow. The terrain eliminates numerical advantage. A smaller force can delay a larger one. Delay buys time. Time allows Greece to prepare. Leonidas is not gambling. He is calculating. Along the way, allies join. Thebans, Thespians, others eager to be seen resisting. Leonidas accepts them, but does not trust them. Discipline cannot be improvised. Fear cannot be unlearned. Only Spartans have been shaped correctly. At the pass, Leonidas surveys the ground: stone, salt, sea, mountains closing like a fist. He feels nothing resembling destiny, only readiness. When Xerxes I arrives, the scale becomes clear. Waves of soldiers, colors, noise. the weight of empire pressing forward. Any illusion of victory evaporates immediately. Xerxes sends offers, threats, promises of wealth and power. He speaks of inevitability, of mercy through submission. Leonidas hears none of it. He knows how this ends. He has always known. The first assaults are testing blows. The Persians expect collapse. They encounter a wall instead. Shields lock, spears thrust. Movements are precise, rehearsed, mechanical. Spartans rotate seamlessly. Wounded men pulled back, fresh men stepping forward. This is not bravery, it is procedure. Persian bodies pile in the pass. Shock ripples through their ranks. Numbers mean nothing where space is limited and discipline absolute. Leonidas fights alongside his men, not because he needs to, but because kings in Sparta lead by presence, not distance. He does not shout encouragement. He corrects formations. He kills efficiently. His face shows nothing. Days pass. The cost mounts. Persia bleeds time. Then comes betrayal. A local Greek reveals a mountain path. The pass will be flanked, the position compromised. Leonidas is informed without ceremony. No panic, no surprise. This was always a possibility. He calls the council. Most allies are dismissed, ordered to leave while they can. Some go gratefully, some in shame, some refuse, determined to share the end. Leonidas allows it. Their reasons are their own. The Spartans stay, not because of honor, because they were chosen knowing this was likely the outcome. Leonidas walks among them. No speech, no promise of glory. They do not need lies. They have lived in truth their entire lives. They fight the final day knowing there will be no relief. The combat becomes chaos. Spears break, swords snap, hands, teeth, shields, everything becomes a weapon. Leonidas is wounded, then wounded again. Still he fights. When he falls, the Spartans close ranks around his body. Not out of reverence, but necessity. The king's corpse cannot be taken. That would matter symbolically. Even in death, utility remains. Eventually, numbers overwhelm discipline. The last Spartans die where they stand. The delay is achieved. Greece prepares. Later poets will speak of freedom, of sacrifice, of defiance against tyranny. Herodotus will record words that may or may not have been spoken. Statues will be raised. Myths will calcify. But the truth is colder. Leonidas did not die for freedom. He died because Sparta built him to die well. He was not a hero chasing immortality. He was a weapon used exactly as designed. Leonidas is already dead. That truth settles into Greece slowly, unevenly, like cold creeping through stone. At first it is rumor, then confirmation, then something heavier, meaning. The man is gone, but the consequences of his decisions are only beginning. In Sparta, grief is not permitted. Mourning is regulated. Excess emotion is weakness, and weakness invites instability. The women wail briefly, sharply, like ritualized release valves. Then silence returns. The system continues. Sparta does not pause for the dead, especially not for kings. Leonidas's body never returns. There is no burial, no closure, just absence. And yet his shadow grows larger with each retelling of the battle. The man who could not bend becomes useful in ways he never was alive. Sparta elevates him carefully, not as a saint. Saints suggest compassion. Leonidas is shaped into something colder, a standard, a measuring rod, a warning. Children are told his name early. In the Agoge, instructors invoke him not as inspiration, but as expectation. This is what obedience looks like. This is how a Spartan ends. The lesson is clear. If even a king is expendable, no one is exempt. Gorgo understands immediately. As queen, she becomes custodian of his memory, but not sentimentally. She does not soften the story. She sharpens it. She speaks of his certainty, his discipline, his refusal to compromise. She reminds Sparta that Leonidas did not hesitate, did not plead, did not negotiate. She never mentions fear. Fear has no place in the official narrative. Beyond Sparta, the story mutates. In Athens, Leonidas becomes a symbol of resistance. Philosophers and politicians reshape him into a martyr for freedom, an uncomfortable fit, but a useful one. His rigid obedience is reframed as noble defiance. His calculated sacrifice becomes moral courage. The truth is inconvenient, so it is edited. Leonidas becomes larger than life precisely because the details are stripped away. No one wants to hear about helot massacres or state terror. They want a clean story. A man who stood against tyranny for ideals they recognize. Reality is too sharp. Myth dulls it. The Greek alliance hardens. Sparta's stand buys time, exactly as intended. Fleets mobilize, armies gather. Persia advances, but more cautiously now. The delay costs them momentum, confidence, certainty. Leonidas's true victory is logistical, not moral. Sparta never corrects the myth. Why would it? The lie is useful. Inside the city, discipline tightens further. Leonidas's death becomes justification for harsher measures. Surveillance increases, training intensifies. Any deviation is framed as an insult to his sacrifice. The system hardens, as systems under pressure always do, but cracks begin to show. Cleomenes' instability, once dismissed as anomaly, is re-examined. The dual kingship system, once a balancing act, feels fragile. Power concentrates. The ephors gain leverage. Tradition becomes dogma. Leonidas had been stable because he was predictable. Predictability dies with him. Sparta continues to win battles, but something subtle erodes. Adaptability, flexibility, the willingness to evolve. Leonidas' example freezes the culture in amber. Change becomes betrayal. The agoge produces soldiers who emulate his endurance, but not his restraint. Discipline becomes brutality for its own sake. Fear replaces respect. What Leonidas embodied naturally must now be enforced artificially. Generations pass. Sparta's reputation remains fearsome, but its influence wanes. Rivals learn to counter its tactics. Empires adapt. Warfare changes. Rigidity becomes liability. Leonidas's legend grows even as Sparta's power fades. Outside Greece, storytellers exaggerate. Sculptors idealize. Eventually, centuries later, artists imagine him half-naked, roaring, defiant, everything he was not. Emotion replaces calculation. Individualism replaces obedience. The irony is complete. Leonidas becomes famous for qualities he never valued. The real man disappears beneath layers of admiration and misunderstanding. His cruelty is erased, his context forgotten. The system that created him is reduced to a backdrop for heroism. But strip away the myth, and the truth remains. Leonidas was not a rebel king. He was the ultimate loyalist. He did not fight Persia because he hated empire. Sparta was an empire, small, brutal, internal. He fought because submission would have disrupted the internal balance of terror that kept his society functioning. He chose death because it was the least damaging option. He did not bend, not out of pride, but because bending was never part of his design. In the end, Leonidas succeeds perfectly. He delays Persia. He unites Greece. He provides a story powerful enough to outlive his city. And he leaves behind a model of leadership so absolute it eventually suffocates the culture that worships it. That is the final contradiction. Leonidas saves Sparta in the short term and helps doom it in the long one. Because systems built on rigidity cannot adapt forever, and kings who cannot bend leave behind legacies that shatter. The lie does not begin immediately. It forms slowly, the way stone smooths underwater, patient, unconscious, inevitable. No one gathers in a room and decides to invent a legend. Legends happen when truth becomes inconvenient, and silence fills the gaps. Leonidas is dead. That is fact. Everything after is negotiable. In Sparta, the truth is never discussed openly. It does not need to be. The state prefers implication. Children hear fragments. Soldiers repeat phrases. Over time, the edges soften. Leonidas becomes simpler, cleaner, useful. The story told to boys in the agoge is stripped of complexity. There is no mention of calculation, no explanation of why only 300 marched, no discussion of breeding lines, expendability, or strategic delay. Those details invite questions. Questions are dangerous. Instead, the story becomes about choice, about courage, about standing against impossible odds because it is right. This is the first distortion. Leonidas did not choose Thermopylae because it was noble. He chose it because it worked. But nobility sells better than logistics. Sacrifice is more inspiring than arithmetic. So arithmetic disappears. Outside Sparta, the lie grows faster. Athens takes ownership of the narrative almost immediately. It reshapes Leonidas into something compatible with its values. A free man choosing death over submission. A king who fought for liberty rather than order. This version spreads because it flatters the teller. Freedom needs martyrs. Leonidas becomes one. Poets embellish. Orators dramatize. The story gains speeches no one heard. Last words no one recorded. He is made eloquent, defiant, almost emotional. The real Leonidas spoke little. That would not do. In time, Herodotus records the events. He gathers accounts, weighs stories, and does what all historians must, chooses. He preserves enough truth to anchor the tale, but myth seeps in around it like fog. He does not invent the legend. He legitimizes it, and once written, the story hardens. Leonidas's image spreads beyond Greece. The Romans admire him, not for freedom, but for discipline. They see in him a reflection of their own ideals, duty, hierarchy, sacrifice for the state. They adopt him selectively, ignoring the parts that do not fit. Centuries pass, empires rise and fall. Leonidas survives them all. Each age reshapes him in its own image. Medieval writers frame him as a proto-knight. Renaissance thinkers see a philosopher king. Modern storytellers turn him into a symbol of individual defiance, roaring against tyranny. This version is the most distorted of all. The modern Leonidas screams. He challenges gods and kings alike. He is emotional, expressive, almost romantic. He fights because he feels it is right. The real Leonidas would not recognize this man. He would find him dangerous. Emotion was not strength in Sparta. It was a liability. A man who fights from passion is unpredictable. A man who fights from obedience can be controlled. But the lie has momentum now. It becomes visual, sculpted, painted, eventually filmed, muscles exaggerated, violence aestheticized. Sparta becomes a brotherhood of warriors instead of a machine that consumed its own children. The helots vanish entirely from the story. So does the terror. So does the cruelty. The myth demands purity, and purity requires forgetting. The irony is almost complete. Leonidas becomes a global icon of resistance to oppression, while the system that created him was among the most oppressive societies in Greek history. This contradiction is never resolved. It is simply ignored. Sparta itself fades quietly. No final stand, no dramatic collapse, just irrelevance. Its rigid systems fail to adapt. Its enemies learn. Its population shrinks. Its influence erodes. But Leonidas grows stronger. Statues outlive cities. The man who was expendable in life becomes invaluable in death. And that is the deepest lie of all. Leonidas was never meant to be remembered. Sparta did not train men for legacy. It trained them for function. A Spartan who died well was not special. He was expected. Leonidas' only distinction was rank. The myth pretends he transcended the system. In truth, he embodied it perfectly. Strip away the speeches, strip away the imagery, strip away the modern longing for heroes who die for ideals. What remains is a man shaped so completely by his society that he could not imagine another way to exist. Leonidas did not ask whether Sparta was just. He asked whether it would survive. He did not consider mercy. He considered stability. He did not bend, not because bending was dishonorable, but because bending was unthinkable. And so the lie persists, because the truth is uncomfortable. The truth says that discipline without compassion creates efficiency, but also stagnation. That obedience can produce greatness, but also atrocity. That a man can be admirable and terrifying at the same time. Legends do not tolerate that kind of complexity. They demand simplicity. They demand heroes. So Leonidas is polished, elevated, and safely removed from the brutal context that made him possible. The lie does not dishonor him. It protects us from him. Strip the story down far enough, and Leonidas stands alone again. No slow-motion defiance, no speeches carved into stone, no noble suffering sanctified by hindsight. Just a man produced by Sparta, shaped exactly as intended, used exactly as planned, and discarded without hesitation when the calculation demanded it. This is what remains when the myth dies. Leonidas was not exceptional because he defied Sparta. He was exceptional because he never did. That distinction matters more than any statue ever raised in his name. The Spartan system did not create heroes. It created reliability. It did not reward originality. It punished it. It did not ask men to dream of a better world. It asked them to hold the line long enough for the world to be managed. Leonidas fit perfectly. That is why he rose. That is why he was trusted. That is why he was sent to Thermopylae with a force designed to die. And that is why his memory became dangerous. Because once Leonidas becomes a hero instead of a function, the lesson changes. The myth tells us to admire his courage. The truth asks us to examine the system that required such courage as routine. Sparta's greatest success was not its battlefield dominance. It was its ability to convince generations of men that their own disposability was honorable. Leonidas did not invent that idea. He simply validated it by embodying it as king. This is the part the legend cannot survive. A society that demands perfection from children by starving them. A state that maintains order by ritualized murder. A culture that measures worth by usefulness to war. Leonidas was not an aberration within that system. He was its proof of concept. When later civilizations praise him, they are not praising resistance. They are praising discipline so absolute that it overrides instinct, fear, even self-preservation. They are admiring the outcome while ignoring the cost. That admiration is revealing, because every age that resurrects Leonidas does so when it needs permission to demand sacrifice. When leaders need bodies to stand still, when systems need loyalty more than conscience, the myth becomes a tool, just as Leonidas was. The uncomfortable truth is not that Leonidas died bravely, it is that he lived obediently. He never questioned the agoge, never challenged the helot system, never asked whether Sparta's stability was worth its cruelty. Not once, as far as history can tell, did he hesitate to enforce laws that destroyed as many lives as they preserved. This does not make him a villain. It makes him honest. He did exactly what he was raised to do, and that is what makes him frightening, because Leonidas proves that evil does not always wear the face of madness or ambition. Sometimes it wears discipline, sometimes it looks like order, sometimes it feels like safety. Sparta fell not because it lacked men like Leonidas, but because it relied on them too completely. A system built on rigidity cannot adapt forever. A culture that worships obedience eventually runs out of flexibility. Leonidas delayed Persia. He could not save Sparta from itself, and yet his name endures. It endures because we prefer stories where sacrifice is noble rather than necessary, where death is meaningful rather than procedural, where men choose martyrdom instead of being assigned to it. We reshape Leonidas because the real one forces an uncomfortable question. What kind of society produces men who die without ever asking why, and then praises them for it? When the myth finally dies, when the speeches fade and the statues crack, what remains is not inspiration, it is warning. Leonidas was not the last Spartan king, but he was the clearest mirror Sparta ever held up to itself. And when we look at him honestly, without legend, without romance, we are not meant to cheer, we are meant to understand, because the real Leonidas does not ask for admiration. He asks whether we would have done the same, and whether we should.